Good morning from the 15th European Space Conference in Brussels. We are connecting from the EU Space Corner with 4 industry insiders. We're going to discuss this morning the topic of skills. What is the situation with skills in the European space sector? Are there shortages? What are the needs? How is this evolving, and what needs to be done so that the industry is not handicapped in this global competition for talent? I'm very delighted to be joined here on stage by 4 speakers, which I will introduce. And I will start with Carla Filotico. She's partner at SpaceTec Partners. Mr. Marc TONDRIAUX, chairman of URSC, European Association of Remote Sensing Companies, and also a CEO of TerraNIS. I have Mr. Eric Tschirhart from the University of Luxembourg, and Mrs. Renata Mele, Senior Vice President for Sustainability and Chief Technology and Innovation at Leonardo. So, we call this session Insider's View. And I will start my first question for Carla. I mean, for many years, SpaceTec has done a lot of studies looking into different dimensions of the European space sector. Could you give us a bit the canvas of what is the situation in the space sector today? Is there skills shortage? And if it is, how is this affecting the industry? And what is the outlook, considering also some of the main technology trends in the sector?
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, and pleasure being here today. So here I would like to put on screen a couple of results of a recent study we have conducted for the European Commission, STARS EU, under which, together with other companies and universities, we have mapped the current situation in terms of education and skills in Europe. So in a nutshell, while the slide is going to be coming on screen, basically what we are observing is that looking and starting from the university side, the European offering is quite large in terms of available and interesting curricula in support of the space industry, but is mainly focused on the hard skills, if you wish. So an engineering degree in Europe most of the time includes only STEM, meaning science, technology, engineering, and maths subjects, a bit less of arts. Of course, in US, the situation is a bit different with the Bachelor of Arts, in that case, which in the beginning is a broader. So it's including also aspects which are not necessarily related to technologies. But from that perspective, we have a very good breadth of possible curricula overall in Europe. Another important statistics in our analysis is that most of the degrees that then go to work in the space sector are mainly at bachelor and master in science, and 50% are PhD. The ones that go to the industry, of course, the ones that stay and work in the space sector in the research arena are more PhD by definition, because they stay and continue studying. Another important statistics, and I really would like to highlight this, because we are discussing this morning about the representation of women at leadership, but not only, overall in the space industry. And based on our survey, only 25% of the total employment in the space sector are actually women. So we were discussing with our colleagues here, is that depending, because from STEM, the graduation of women is less relevant, that the one coming from, of course, the male demographics. So that could be a correlation that we can easily make. Also considering that when we look at the SME compared, a small medium enterprise compared to a large industry, in that case there is a bit more balanced requirement in terms of both STEM and other skills. while in the bigger industry, when they require and hire new graduates, they mainly tend to hire degrees or students from STEM universities. So you see the correlation. If the STEM degrees are actually giving less women out of the graduation, so by conclusion, of course, also the industry is lacking women. The other consideration about this is that also where the career spend, and we have another slide in the report that potentially can be shared at least in this panel, is that the tendency of women, and this is in general in the leadership, is when we look at the age distribution, is younger. So that means at a certain point, so women enter, but then exit the industry and do not proceed in the career progression. So meaning at the end of the day, less leaders or less C-level women in the industry. And then I will stop with the last point in regards to shortage that was asked indeed. So based on our survey, out of 100, let's say, jobs post in the industry, some from the industry about space employment, there is still a shortage. So meaning that not all these job postings are actually fulfilled. So that means that there is, a bit of a gap between the needs of the industry and the students or graduates then applying for these jobs. And I'll pause it here for the dialogue later, because I think that can spark some interesting discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carla. Some very interesting figures indeed. So we retained a lot. There is a skill shortage. Very often the skill set is not adapted to what the industry need is. So my next question will be for Professor Tschirhart. You are professor at the University of Luxembourg, but you also representing an alliance of 5 universities from 5 member states, which was created to develop some new ways of collaboration in the field of space. Luxembourg is also a very interesting example. We have very well-established companies like SES, but we also have a very vibrant new space scene. From the academic perspective, how do you see that this has impacted, or not at all, the evolution of the academic offer? And is there a need for some new or different skill sets in the sector, and how is the education system responding to this? If you can give us your perspective.
Yes, good morning and thank you for the invitation. Very pleased to be here. In a nutshell, within UNIVERSEH, which is effectively an alliance of 5 universities, we are focused on the space sector. And the first thing that we've done 2 years ago is to do a survey within 100+ companies just to understand what they need in terms of skill and competencies. So without being very long on these kind of figures, but there are a number of things which are coming out. The essentials of our question was the following. What would you be doing within 5 or 10 years in terms of hiring people? What would be your ideas of skill and competence that you would need within 10 years? So there were interesting releases out of this survey, and there are some buzzing words coming out, and which was quite surprising in view of a classical STEM curricula that we in Europe. For example, we have something which came first, was very surprising to me as an academic, was interpersonal skills and cooperation. If you explain this to an engineering school, it's very difficult to swallow. The second one was communication, and something which came up quite recently also, and it was not so much a surprise because if you consider new space, is the term finance. Now, if you look at space industry, most of the people we interviewed were looking at people who know finance. They must be engineers, they must be technical people, but they must also understand finance, which is a very drastic difference in terms of willingness and skill from the European industry in space for the next 5 or 10 years. Now, at the end of the day, when looking at a survey, we came to a conclusion that the academic programs must be flexible. And this question of flexibility will not be done without the help of the industry. You may know that professors in general have a large ego. They know everything. The older they get, the older they know, even if they're not within their specialty. So we need the help from the industry in this contract. We sort of push pushy messages also. If we do something bad, we must know in the academy that we do something bad. Because at the end of the day, we are producing the people for you, and you pay these people, and there is a sort of responsibility and liability in this context. Now, the one thing also which came out of this survey in terms of curriculum development is the following. Most of the industrials are looking at people which are trained as problem-based learning or problem-based solvers. They are not so much interested in theory anymore. They are not anymore interested in people having a large knowledge. They can still acquire it during their professional, which comes out to the discussion of lifelong learning. People don't come up with a final knowledge at the end of the study, which will stay for the next 30 years. There must be some training all along, and universities and engineering schools must take this into account. And the last point that I would like to follow is this one. The space industry has a cycle. If you look at the technology, the way things are developing and so on, it's almost a 15-year cycle on every subject. If you look at ESA, if you look at NASA on big program, it's a 15-year cycle, and most of the academic programs are slow in adapting. This means that when a group of professors decided to do something, it will take 10 years before something coming out. It's already out of the cycle from the space industry. So university and school, engineering school, must do something in this context. Last but not least, I would advocate also what we call blended learning. If you want to have people get more knowledge within the industry, they have to go through lifelong learning, not forcibly going out of Europe or very far solutions. But blended learning, using the modern digitalization tools are extremely useful. You get super courses. Even within our consortium, we build up 16 interdisciplinary courses for industry in 1 year. It is possible, and it's giving an output also for the industry in this context. So forward-looking, I'm very confident if people are just talking together. This is absolutely key in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your very interesting perspective. So we not only need hardcore STEM skills, but we need a lot more soft skills. It was also coming out in your study. My next question will be for Mr. TONDRIAUX. As a representative of industry, of course, you represent UNIVERSEH, but also a small company in the downstream value chain. How do you see this question of skills? Is industry exchanging enough with the academic and training institutions to deliver the skills of tomorrow? Are there maybe some best practices that you can share in bridging this gap? And what does this mean for a small company like TerraNIS that you also manage?
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation, and thank you, Professor, for your kind words about the cooperation between industry and academy for tackling this problem. First of all, I would like to point out that UNIVERSEH is an association which gathers the companies, about 130 companies, but from the downstream sector, meaning not building satellites, but really using or operating these satellites, which means companies which are normally closer to the market and to the user needs. In total, the sector, the downstream sector, represents about 750 companies with 12,000 employees, and importantly, about 80% of them are working in SMEs. It's really a specificity of this sector. And every year we are also running a survey in the industry, and in the last one we ask the questions about the difficulties to find the right people for the right places. And yes, typically I think that 77% of the companies answered that yes, they were facing difficulties to find the right skills. And more interestingly, we ask which kind of skills are most lacking. So the two first categories were dealing with software development and architects and data analytics, which is not surprising because it's something which we can see in almost all economic sectors. But more surprisingly, The third one was dealing with business-oriented and sales skills, which is more surprising because effectively we are more talking about soft competences and soft skills, which should not be so difficult to find if perhaps closer links are established between the industry and the academy in order to be sure that the business schools and university are also taking care a bit more about the specificity of the downstream Earth observation services, which is, I think, important because that's also a sector which is moving because first we are more and more moving from pure R&D towards more operational services closer to the user. So for that we need people who understand the end user needs and aspirations, and in order to be sure that the fit is good between solutions and needs. But also there is, as already said, the emergence of what is called the new space, which is making an appeal of different types of skills. It has been highlighted with respect to the finance skill, but also, yes, business oriented in order to prepare or consolidate the business plan in order to be sure that this new constellation will at the end find their market. With respect to the good experience, I would just mention an initiative, project, which is the EU4Geo Alliance, which is gathering about 25 partners in Europe, partners from academy, from industry sectors, and who are working on establishing or trying to set up what is called a long-term action plan, whereby the goal is precisely to try to find a better fit between the education world and the needs from industry. That's certainly something which must be extended and broadened, I would say, in order to be more efficient at the end in Europe. And the last point, and just to fully in agreement with what you said, Professor, we have to consider that the education and training is not a short-term feedback loop, or control loop, as we say in technical world. Takes time, so which means that we have to think not only on the short term, meaning the needs today, but we have to plan what will happen in 5, perhaps 10 years, in order to be sure that at the end, the students we are training now are fitting the needs tomorrow. I think it's something here again that where close discussions between industry and academy is necessary.
Thank you very much for sharing this perspective from industry and also sharing your interesting experience with Earth and the EU4Geo initiative. My next question will be for Mrs. Renata Mele. You are Senior Vice President at Leonardo for Sustainability. Greening the industry is something very topical. We all talk about here in conferences. What do you think are the skills that are needed for the green transition of the space industry, or industry more generally? How do you see this from the perspective of a well-established company such as Leonardo? And what is Leonardo doing to make the aerospace and defense ecosystem more sustainable? And maybe to link this to the topic of our discussion, is this making the industry more attractive for new talent from your perspective?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your question. Thank you for the invitation. Very glad to be here. It's clear that the green transition and more generally the sustainability transition represent one of the most important topics in the agenda of institution, corporation, because we know that there is an urgency to go towards the green transition. And I would say that the geopolitical context in Europe particularly has made this urgency even more important, because energy and what is happening in the sector of energy is driving us towards a green transition more and more. And the space sector, the aerospace and defense sector, because I would say that this is a broader view that we need to have in this context. The aerospace and defense sector can have a really important role. First of all, we have to green ourselves, so improve our operations, our supply chain. So there is an ecosystem that has to be involved in the green transition. And we know that, and this is the same situation for other sectors in manufacturing. But we have an important atu more, that we can be enabler of the green transition with our technological innovation, promoting new ideas and new solutions. Consider just the downstream space applications. So the combination of satellite data with advanced algorithms and all the application that can be developed in this field. So this is a world of application that can be an incredible impact in many industries for protecting territories, protecting, for understanding, monitoring, for predicting new events. So it's clear that our sector can be really important in this. So what are the skills that are most important to drive this process? We already talk a lot about, hard skills, scientific, technological background, digital skills, the twin transition, that is something that has to be, fostered by this context to achieve the sustainability. And we know that. But there is also a part of the soft skill related to the critical thinking, analytical thinking, coping with uncertainties. And all these kind of skills that, by the way, have been recognized also by the World Economic Forum as top skills by 2025, represent some kind of skills of the future that we need to improve to push forward our comprehension of this sector and, of course, to drive the transformation. But I would say that we need something more. And at Leonardo, Leonardo is a company, aerospace and defense global company, active worldwide, so leading different technological fields. So we preside over strategic technologies. And for us, innovation is vital. But what is important is to drive and to address innovation in a direction that can be towards the solution of global problems. And this is vital also for the business, because sustainability is a key of competitiveness. So I think that we have to not only talk about skills, but also about mindset. We need a new sustainability mindset to develop skills to drive the green transition and the ecological transition. And in this sense, I think that the partnership with academia, research center, is really important. It's important to have a new generation of talent, of manager, that start to think to the business in a different way. Business as unusual, it was said in the past, but now it's becoming more and more usual, introducing sustainability concept in the managerial practices, because we need to cope with uncertainty at managerial level, but also to have a new generation of people, of workers, of managers that have in mind long-term evolution. And that's why it's so important, I think, to combine sustainability mindset together with the growth of skills for the future.
Thank you very much. So obviously there's so many different dimensions of this skills conversation. It's not something we can address in a 30-minute session. So I would like to thank you for your initial remarks. And to conclude our conversation, I would ask you one question. And if you can, in 1 minute, each of you, just tell us your perspective. How can all actors from industry, academia, and public institutions better cooperate with each other and come up with joint solutions, long-term solutions, to bring the skills gap in our space sector. Maybe we start with Carla.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is something that's already started eventually to initiate this dialogue where more and more, let's say, the supply and demand talk together. So supply meaning the people providing with training, meaning universities and training centers and etc., and of course the industry. And really having this continuous dialogue in terms of understanding how to evolve eventually the breadth of the skills trained and offered from university upwards. And I would like also to link to what Professor just said in terms of really considering the lifetime of a career in space and how indeed over time these extra skills can be filled, and also by the offering of a more accessible university and platform, and from that perspective. So,
thank you. So, Marc.
Nothing. Sorry, I cannot agree anymore. Perhaps the only thing I can add is the possibility of using perhaps more some tools like having some thesis. Students making their PhD in cooperation between industry and university. That's something which is already happening, but can be developed a bit more, because that's also a way of maintaining the dialogue between the academy and the academic world and the industry.
Thank you. And Professor Tschirhart.
To be really honest, I like the supply and demand paradigm. We have actually in universities and schools, even if it's very unpolitical to say it, we have two clients, two class of clients. We have students and we have the industry. We are just intermediate between the supply and the demand. This means that if we consider that space is changing, we are going from a publicly funded space to a privately funded spaces with new entrants. Schools and university has to adapt and to discuss with the clients. This means the students to some extent, but also with the industry. If we don't discuss with industry, we won't progress, any of us. And I think it's absolutely key for the future.
Thank you very much. And last?
Well, I think I fully agree with Professor. It's really important, this kind of collaboration and I would say, a kind of partnership agreement among the different actors. Industry, academia, university and research center are for us a really important partner in this process. And with students, and to understand the need of new generation means to have this flow of information continuously. This kind of cooperation that has to become, in some sense, co-design of new areas, of new area of activities, because it's really important that this kind of new ideas and new skills become directly permeates the innovation in the company. So that's why in this context, partnership with academia and research is really vital for big companies.
Thank you very much. So we all see there is a problem, there is a gap. Bridging this gap will require collective effort from industry, academia, from government institutions. Bridging the gap will be really vital for the future of our space industry. And the ones who are mindful of this and able to tackle the issue will build resilience for the future and will have competitive advantage in a fiercely competitive global world. So I would like to thank you all for your insights, to thank you for the participation and also the ones that have followed us online. This is a conversation that we will continue, and I hope that the topic of skills will also make it in the mainstream program of conferences like this one for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.